Puck's in a microwave approach, focusing on stalkers one by one.
Bolt coming in from every single angle. There's a time warp, but look at this concave, this crescent moon.
This is what's going to happen now. The supply goes in Huck's favor.
He's just going to barrel through, take out whatever. So much fire here coming forth.
Looking like Nesty is going to take it here.
Dancing the roaches a little bit. Scarlett.
Now the Hydras are exposed. Those units are going to die, and it's not really going to make that much of a difference. GG.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from New York City. You're watching live coverage of WCS America, the Challenger League, where we're trying to find out who's going to make it into the Premier League of Season 2. As always, I'm axeltoss, joined by my friend axslav. How are you doing today, man?
Doing very excellent. These are the most exciting matches of the Challenger bracket, I think, because, of course, like you said, everybody who wins these matches straight into Premier League, and that's, of course, where every player wants to be. It's a lot of guaranteed money, a lot of guaranteed WCS points, and a chance to place very highly, make it to those regional finals.
Of course, we had players that were already in Premier League of Season 1. They were knocked out in the round of 32 or the round of 16, and they're trying to fight their way back in. We also have players who made it through the Challenger League qualifier bracket, and they're trying to get into Premier League for the first time, and also a wealth of Chinese players as well, so it should be interesting to see how well they play in these brackets. That being said, though, let's take a look at the brackets and see what we have on our hands today. Of course, again, the winner of each of these best of threes will advance to Season 2 Premier League of WCS America. Top versus Apocalypse, Major versus Violet, Scarlett versus Jim, and Sen versus Theognis. Of course, on the other side of the bracket in this round of 16 of the bracket stage, we got Kapach versus Nesty, Puck versus Suppy, Polt versus Tasia, and the STC versus DeMuslim. Also important to note, all the losers from the bracket portion of the Challenger League, they drop down to the group stage. Of course, top 3 in the group stage stay in WCS America. Third place gets into the WCS America Challenge League of Season 2. First and second get into the Premier League of Season 2. So still a lot of awesome matches coming your way, but we got a pretty exciting day today.
Some amazing talent here today. We're starting off with Scarlett versus Jim. And Scarlett, of course, we saw her recently in the round of 16 of the Premier League. And she actually had Hero on the ropes a bit in a couple of those games, some nice leads, but then fell through in the late game, and then her ZVZ didn't really hold up the snuff either in that group, so she was knocked out. Every one of these matches, you'll see one player who got kicked out of the round of 16 of the Premier League, and one player who's made it up through the Challenger League bracket stage. In fact, all the players on the left are players who've lost in the round of 16 in the Premier League. The players on the right were players who have fought their way through this Challenger brackets round 1 and 2.
And honestly, actually, now that you say that, every person on the right there, they're players who came from the qualifiers, except for Kapach. I think Kapach is the only guy who actually came from Premier League. I think he dropped down in the round of 32. So that's pretty interesting developments all across the board. Of course, Jim, a Chinese player, Top, a Chinese player as well. So we'll have to see how they do. But that being said, first match of the night, I know everyone's really wanting to get into it. It's going to be Scarlett versus Jim. Of course, Scarlett performing very well in the round of 32, and then falling from the round of 16, where she found herself in a group involving Hero Revival, who are the two that she lost to. Of course, Snoot was in that group as Suppy, yes, excuse me. Suppy was in that group as well, falling 0-2 to Hero, and those are actually really good games. Hero looking unstoppable in WCS America so far, and then falling 1-2 to Revival, and now she finds herself here. But one of those premier Canadian players, one of those premier non-Korean players, one of those players that everyone's like, okay, this person has a chance to do some great things in StarCraft 2.
You know, that's actually a very good point, because towards the end of Wings of Liberty, she was one of the top couple players outside Korea, according to the vast majority of players. Extremely, extremely talented, but so far in Heart of the Swarm, she hasn't had that big result yet. And, I mean, she didn't make it through the round 32 in the Premier League, which is pretty impressive.
Yep.
She did fall out of the round of 16, and a player like Scarlett is, I mean, she's only happy with a top 1, 2, or 3 place. So she's thinking, Season 2, I gotta do better. Only way to do better is first to make it into Season 2 of Premier League, which means she needs to beat Jim right now.
Speaking of which, Jim is, he's been a dominant player. We've seen, Entering the season, we didn't know anything about him, but obviously since then we've seen a lot of his matches. Of course, he defeated Oz and Vibe to get to this point. Of course, Vibe versus Oz, that happened on Monday, and those were interesting games because Vibe kind of went for these strategies involving a lot of early cheese type stuff, really trying to take Jim off guard. So we didn't really get a good sense necessarily of how Jim would play in a long macro game. So I'm assuming Scarlett is going to show a lot of respect for Jim. They're going to show a lot of respect for each other, and I feel like these are going to be long, great games. But Jim, one of those guys who, he's been #1 on the Korean ladder. He's been there a number of times.
The Korean GM ladder.
Yeah,
this isn't like, you know, bronze division.
Yeah, some bronze players are like, well, I'm #1 in my bronze ladder. What does that mean? But yeah, no, he's actually really good.
Extremely talented. Many people saying the best player from China, or at least one of the top couple, along with, of course, XY Max said, Zigua, a couple other players top. Very, very, very good. And he's, like you mentioned, he's looked unstoppable. He hasn't even seemed like anyone can touch him so far in WCS America.
Yep.
Scarlett had some trouble in the Premier League round of 16, but now she's here in the Challenger bracket round 3.
Yep.
Can she take down Jim? Looks like Jim's ready to go.
Jim's ready. Waiting on Scarlett. Of course, we're live in the lobby right now, and guys, remember to tweet hashtag WCS, and your tweet might appear on stream. Both players have given me the go-go. So it's time to begin a best of 3 between Scarlett and Jim to find out who's going to advance to the Premier League of Season 2. A very important match for both of these players. Jim, a guy who came through the qualifiers, trying to make it into the Premier League for the first time and showing dominant play thus far. Scarlett was in round of 32 Premier, was in round of 16 Premier, but got knocked out by Hero and Revival. Has something to prove. Definitely wants a spot in Premier League Season 2. Map number 1 is going to be on Belshire Vestige. And when you think about a PvZ involving Scarlett on Belshire Vestige, a lot of people are going to recall the match against Hero, where Hero just showed absolute dominant play. It was ridiculous. Hero was on a completely other level. So we'll have to see how these two players go at it here in this game number 1 in the top left-hand location. We have the Red Zerg player representing Team Acer. Hailing from Canada, she is Scarlett. Scarlett has a massive fan base around the world. I know a lot of people watching, definitely cheering her on. Her opponent in the bottom right-hand location, trying to make a name for himself in the world scene, in the world scope. In this case, specifically WCS America. He took out Oz and Vibe to get to this point. Representing Team Invictus Gaming and hailing from China, he is Jim.
You know, one thing, you point out how everyone's going to be thinking of that Scarlett Hero match.
Yes.
On Belshire Vestige. Now, Hero looked so powerful. One thing it is important to note that Scarlett was significantly ahead. She played the first about 10 to 12 minutes of the game much better than Hero did, and she found herself with a significant lead. And that's part of what made Hero look so unstoppable, is that even with that disadvantage, he was able to come back and make that one happen. But you also have to realize Scarlett is insanely good. I mean, she was playing she was outplaying Hero for the first 12 minutes, and she got herself a lead. And up against Jim, she has to be thinking, okay, I do the same thing for the first 12 minutes, and then going forward, I just need to play a little bit better, and I'll be in great shape.
You know, it's also interesting because if Scarlett's like maybe watching some of the matches from top earlier, not going to be able to take much from of Jim earlier. Not going to be able to take much from Jim versus Oz for obvious reasons. It's a PvP. The only other PvZ that Jim has played in this Challenger League was against Vibe. And we talked about it a little bit before, Vibe kind of going for the cheesy strategies. Again, he told me before the match started, he's like, all right, this guy's really good. I don't necessarily want to go to the late game even. I want to try to get a lead early on. Now, I don't know if Scarlett's going to have that same mentality. So it should be interesting to see how she approaches this. But, you know, I feel like she's going to be very confident with her play. And at least in game 1, I feel like we are going to see standard play from both of these two individuals. That will advance into the mid-game and beyond. In Belshire Vestige, it's a map that's kind of receptive to that, a very long rush distance. Hard to get some early shenanigans done. Unless you can hide a pylon, which is doable on this map, but Scarlett should be aware of that.
One thing I'm a little bit worried about Scarlett is I think this map, like you said, is pretty hard to rush. And it's also, almost all the major engagements happen in relatively confined spaces. Mm-hmm. Which means that the Zerg player, I think it's very important to tech as fast as possible, because Vipers are so essential when you're fighting these confined spaces because you can't get that big surround where you can really close the distance, break through the forest fields, and take out the Protoss army. You're going to have to rely on abducting the key units towards you to take them out. And that's something we saw Snoot do with great success on this map. But we haven't seen Scarlett really utilize that fast Viper tech style as much. More often, just powering through with a ton of roaches and then even transitioning to swarm hosts. And that's a style where it's a little bit harder to actually make aggression happen on a map with so many chokes like Belshire Vestige.
Two Lings trying to sneak inside. Jim trying to be fancy with his micro, taking out one of them, but one of the Lings will survive, getting some scouting done. Not going to be able to see too much. Jim has not added on that tech building just yet. There we go, the Stargate just now added on. I think it's the natural expansion. But something else that we're going to have to look out for in this game that Scarlett is known for, I'll give you guys 10 seconds to think about it. It's our creep spread. That wasn't 10 seconds. That was like 2 seconds. But, she is known for her creep spread. There's always going to be a screenshot on Reddit or something of like the entire map covered in creep, and before you click on it, you're like, oh, that's Scarlett. That's what she does. She opened up with 4 queens here, so that's what she's going to really focus on in this game, as she always does, getting that map vision, and that's really important. And we saw that kind of against Hero. I think there's a Neoplanet S game as well, where that vision is so important, but it's still so difficult to deal with a player like Hero. But that being said, having good creep spread is so important in the PvZ matchup where positioning is everything, especially if you're going for a unit composition like involving swarm hosts or something. You really need to know what your opponent is, what he's up to, where he's ducking and dodging so you can prepare for it properly.
We see Scarlett going for the upgraded Zerglings before third base build. And this is a build that you see from a decent number of top level Zergs. It shows itself every once in a while. And this is a build I haven't really seen Scarlett use very often, but it's very common. It almost always leads to an Ultralisk rush. And on a map like this, where you can really run around a lot of these different quarters with speedlings and try to keep your opponent on the defensive, delay the third for as long as possible with speedlings, it can be a very powerful opening.
We saw Ghost User do this against Kapach in their game 1 on, I think it was Neoplanet S. It might have been a different map, but you know, that happened yesterday, so some of our viewers might be familiar with that strategy based on what happened there.
It was Cloud Kingdom, I think.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Of course, all those videos are available on YouTube right now, youtube.com/officialmojs YouTube. But we see some Phoenixes scouting across the map looking for Overlords, going Overlord hunting. No Spore Crawlers being added on just yet. There we go, just now being added on here for Scarlett, realizing she's going to have some time. It might squeeze out a little bit more Jones before throwing those spores down. Realizing the Phoenixes are taking on Overlords right now. So she's going to be really focusing on that drone count right now, realizing, okay, Phoenixes aren't really going to kill me. The purpose is just going to go after drones, go after queens, go after Overlords. The scary pushes come a little later.
We're seeing Jim continuing to build probes beyond the 45 marker, so and this indicates that he wants to move out and take a third base, which is the more typical response to a Protoss taking a late third and upgrading Zerglings. We saw Kapach actually tried a 2-base Colossal Timing after the Phoenixes, and it just hits too late. If you're investing gas into Phoenixes, the Zerg player should be able to get Ultras out in time to defend. So Jim is going to do the more standard approach, which is going for third base. It's going to be so important to see how long can Scarlett delay to third base?
Yes.
And basically, how much map control can Jim establish after taking the third base? Can he keep the creep back? Or is the creep going to spread across the entire map? In which case, all of a sudden, the queens can help out the Ultralists throughout the entire map.
I mean, that's the thing. When you're going for a strategy like this, you're not going to really have much map presence, because at any moment, your opponent can swarm in with 60 1-1 speedlings. So it's a very scary prospect until you get, obviously, those Colossus out, those AoE damaging units. And we have a robotics beyond the way, so we're not too far away from that, but that third base being placed down right now here for Jim. And we're going to have to be watching these Lings from Scarlett. You know, can they deny this? I'm not so sure they can, considering, look at all these Zealots Jim made at his third base. He's going to be just fine. Has a lot of Zealots there, a lot of sentries with force field available. So let's see if Scarlett tries to maybe go for a run by into the natural and into the main, if Jim is focusing too much on defending the third. So just some stuff to look out for.
Very safe play by Jim, waiting until he had enough Zealots and sentries to really move out before taking the third. Here come the speedlings.
There's the force field right on time. Ling's trying to find an opening, seeing all the Zealots out of her opponent. Queens trying to get rid of those Phoenixes. And interestingly enough, we got some Infestors mixed into the play here. So it's not like Scarlett is saving all of her gas for the Ultras. Getting some Infestors out first. Probably wants to try to nab those Phoenixes out of the sky.
That's a pretty important point. A lot of Zerg players wait to get the Infestors until after they already have a decent number of Ultras. Of course, this is the idea that, okay, spend all the gas on Ultras and the Queens can be enough support.
Yep.
But Scarlett is showing her own variants. And you know what? I don't need to make 6, 7, 8 Ultras at once. I can just get some Infestors, and the fungal growth is going to be very important as well.
And now, I'm not sure if Jim has been able to notice this. Infestors are just going to now be popping out. Are the fungals going to be good? Looks like I have to keep a close eye on this, because if she can catch those, she's going to be very happy. Indeed, the Phoenix is coming forward. There's the fungal onto the Phoenixes. Remember, she has more than one Infestor, so she can keep chaining them. The Queens need to get over there to help out a little bit, and I think she's going to get them.
One more fungal he needs. Or she needs, excuse me. 2 Phoenixes do get away, but killing the majority of the Phoenixes is so important, because as these battles come into play later in the situation, if the Protoss has 5 or 6 Phoenixes, they can run in and pick up a lot of your Infestors, even kill a couple off, force you to use that energy in those major engagements on the Phoenixes. Whereas if you can get rid of those Phoenixes much earlier, then in the major engagements you can just worry about the bulk of the Protoss force.
And something else that's you know, kind of lesser on the important scale is obviously the 4th base. You don't have to worry as much about, you know, putting up as many spores there if all the Phoenixes are taken out. Which the Phoenixes, you know, they can continue to be annoying throughout the game if they're still alive, obviously, and you're gonna have to worry about those drones at that point. But in the situation, not so much. Scarlett really adding on those Queens, up to 11 Queens in total, 3-3 on the way. Also, chitinous plating as well as adrenal glands. The first Ultralisk has not yet started, but Scarlett has plenty of supply available to start adding those guys on. Now, she only has 200 gas though, and this is kind of due to the fact that she's investing a lot into those Infestors, so needs to make sure to get that 4th base saturated. The gases are going to be very important there, so she can really get a good amount of Ultras on the field. Now, it's interesting because she has all those Queens, so it's like maybe she doesn't need as many Ultras as far as like she can just keep them alive forever, but still, you want to prioritize that gas at this point.
It's kind of neat to see how different she's playing this than we've seen other players played in the past. Most players won't even get the 3-3 upgrades. They won't even get the Infestors. They'll just instantly go for as many Ultras as possible and try to do a massive hit on the Protoss 3rd base as soon as they can get up 8 Ultras. Scarlett said, you know what? Jim's a very good player. He's recognized my build. He's going to make these things like the gateway wall, the pylon walls, all the buildings. So this type of big time attack may not work. So instead, I'll get all the upgrades. I'll get the Infestors, and I'll set myself up in a better position for the late game instead of depending upon one massive Ultras attack.
Look at this creep. We talked about it. We talked about the creep from Scarlett, and she's showing that she still loves spreading that creep. Kind of posturing towards the natural, which is going to allow potentially some Lings to try to run by into the 3rd base. That's exactly what Scarlett's going to try to do here, committing a lot of these Lings to the 3rd base location, starting to target down the Nexus. Let's see if she goes after the probes as well, and still threatening that natural expansion. That goes a fungal onto the entire Protoss army, leaving the Lings free to do so much damage to this 3rd base.
Oh man, many probes going down to the whole position micro. Zealot's been warped in to defend this. Scarlett's trying to push up into natural. This is where the important time warp is stopping those Queens from retreating.
Making the Queens even slower. I did not think that was possible, but Scarlett trying to get out of there, trying to retreat. Getting those probes at the 3rd is great. Now she has to figure out how to deal with this composition, because as it stands, she has the 5th base going up. She just needs to be cost efficient in dealing with this this army composition from Jim.
Jim's moving on to the creep, pretty deep on the creep. He's going to allow the Queens and Ultras.
Ultras coming forward. There go the Fungals as well, trying to keep those units locked in place, disallow the scanning. The Queens transfusing all of the Ultras. The Ultras doing ridiculous damage to this Protoss army, and there's no Mothership Core here, so no ability to recall out of there, and Scarlett getting a great engagement.
Keeping all the Infestors alive is so important. The Ultras are going down, yes, but those can be replaced because you only had about 5 or 6 in the battle. Protoss is forced to retreat after taking severe losses.
Every unit you kill in this situation as Zerg, you're going to be happy with. It's up to the Protoss at this point. 3 bases just lost a lot of units at the 3rd, or a lot of probes, to keep all of their expensive units alive. Scarlett is going to have the better ability to reinforce, but still 5 Immortals alive here, and that's actually a huge amount at this point. So Scarlett would have been a little bit happier if that count was maybe down to 3 or even 2. But as it stands, Jim is going to try to secure this 4th base on the right-hand side, adding on more and more expensive units, 2 additional Colossi in production, and Scarlett's going to be looking for another engagement. And again, she's going to try to be really cost-efficient. She does not want this 4th to get up.
Not too much energy on the Infestors, but if each one can get a single Fung off, that can make a big difference. Most of them, though, only have about 50 energy. She waits another about 10-20 seconds. She'll be able to start chaining Fungals together, and if the Protoss can't kite backwards, Ultras are much more effective. Jim has
to be so careful here. If he handles this engagement improperly, it's not going to be fun for him at all. Scarlett poking forward a little bit, going to be backing up.
She needs that creep to get forward so the queens can be the action.
Targeting down that 4th Nexus, and that's huge. Force the cancel. Actually, I don't even think a cancel happened there, but she might be a little bit trapped here. She's going to have to turn around and engage, bungling this army once again. Bungles blanketing on top of the Stalkers, Colossi, and Immortals. Ultras trying to get that damage done. Queens in the back getting very low on energy, so not too many transfuses available. Scarlett needs to make sure not to overextend. Jim is going to fend that off, but losing that 4th base, going to try to track down these queens. Scarlett needs to get some more units out to deal with this.
She was able to keep most of the Infestors alive yet again, but the Infestors are now vulnerable. Stalkers blinking forward and taking them out.
Oh, Queen's vulnerable as well, but here come 2 Ultras and a bunch of Lings trying to deal with this. Some Corruptors on the way as well, going to be instrumental in dealing with those Colossi, but Jim feeling like he has a lot of momentum, and he does, but again, he doesn't have that 4th base up, which is going to be potentially problematic. So it's a case where killing your opponent's units is fine, but you're going to be down on economy if you don't start worrying about trying to get some harassment done to Scarlett's economy. Scarlett, she's at 78 Harvesters. She's been above 75 Harvesters, you know, up until she got that many. It's not like she's lost a lot of drones. In fact, only 13 workers killed for both these players. So, you know, Scarlett is still going to be okay with this. And Jim, I feel like he's on the clock here. You know, without a 4th, he has to get some damage done.
He does, but he doesn't have a decent Immortal count anymore. Those were taken on last battle, and the Colossi are going to be taken on by the Corruptors.
Oh, Scarlett going for a flank, coming in from the left with the Corruptors and from the back with the Lings and the Ultras. Again, no Mothership Core here, so no ability to recall. The Stalker's going to try to blink away with some decent micro, but the Fungal's keeping a lot in place, and Scarlett going to clean up the army of Jim. She's up 157 to 87 supply. More importantly, keeping that base alive. 3 Stalkers trying to, I don't know what they're trying to do. They're very sad because their family died. But there's the GG from Jim, and Scarlett takes it. Wow. What a game won Scarlett. Again, as you said, showing her own little personal flair of that style that we see that's relatively common in ZVP.
That was so important as well, is the fact that Jim had himself set up, that trying to go for one massive Ultradus bust probably wouldn't have worked. So instead, Scarlett, before getting to Ultradus, make sure to have those upgrades on the way. She made sure to get the Infestor count early, so they accumulate energy, so in this battle she could use those Infestorns, use the Fungal Growths, and then notice how important it was she pulled those Infestors back and used their spells so they'd be alive for the next engagement.
Absolutely, so important to keep those spellcasters, keep those expensive units alive. Scarlett with brilliant play in game number 1. She's going to be up 1-0 against Jim, which means she is 1 win away from getting back into the Premier League of WCS America for Season 2. Guys, stay tuned. Jim versus Scarlett, Game 2 coming up.